Seedfolks, read aloud by Mrs. Carter. Today we're going to be reading our last chapter, Chapter 10, Florence. If you were the author, how would you tie the stories together? Anticipate the ending. Think about how we have learned about all the different characters and their stories and all the different traditions, cultures, and backgrounds that have come together. Just as we are entering a time with less sun and warmth, as we approach fall into winter, the same happens in this last chapter of the book. After reading this last chapter, we will discuss the theme of Seedfolks. Chapter 10, Florence. My great-grandparents walked all the way from Louisiana to Colorado. That was in 1859. They were both freed slaves, and they wanted to get good and far from cotton-growing country. They went over the mountains just to be safe and homesteaded along the Gunson River, which is how my grandfather, and my father, and my sisters and I all came to be born there, the first black family in the whole country. My father called them our Seedfolks because they were the first of our family there. I think of them when I see any of the people who started the garden on Gibb Street. They're Seedfolks too. I'm talking about that first year before there were spigots and hoses and the tool shed and the new soil, and before the landlord started charging more for apartments that look onto the garden. I would have been in the garden for sure if it weren't for this arthritis in my hands. Growing up out in the country, I still miss country things. My husband's from here. He doesn't know about the smell of a hayfield and eating beans off the vine instead of from the store. I had to settle for being a watcher. I wasn't the only one. I'd see others on the fire escapes or standing on the sidewalk like me. One day I looked up and saw a head in a window moving forward and back. It was a man who'd pulled up his rocking chair. He was watching the gardeners like TV. My grandmother's sampler from when she was a child said, "Be solitary, be not solitary, be not idle." That was easy all those years in the library. Being retired, it's harder. So I try to take a walk every day, which is how I found the garden to begin with. I'd always stop there to see what was new. I was just a watcher, but I was proud of the garden as if it were mine. Proud and protective. I remember how mad I got when I saw a man reach through someone's fence by the sidewalk and try to grab a tomato. I said, "How dare you?" He pulled back his hand and said he'd heard it was a community garden. It's sad every fall seeing it turn brown, fewer and fewer people there. That very first year was the hardest. It had been such a wonderful change to see people making something for themselves instead of waiting for it to happen for them. To see a part of the neighborhood better every day, and to smell those good smells of growing plants. The green drained away, then the frost hit. You'd pass and hear those dry cornstalks shaking in the wind as if they were shivering. The pumpkins were about the only color left, and then the boys sold them all. Some people cut up their old plants with clippers and dug them back into the soil. A few covered their ground with leaves. But once that job was done, it was done. By November, the cats were the only ones there. That winter was a cold one, cold as Colorado. You'd walk by the garden covered with snow, just the fence top sticking out, and you'd try to remember back in July. Someone stuck a Christmas tree there in December. It stayed up until March. It's hard to tell one month from another that time of year. It's all just winter. Because of the weather, I missed a lot of walks. When I did get out, I couldn't go past the garden without slowing down to look, even though there was nothing growing. Sometimes there'd be one of the gardeners there, too, just looking, too. You can't see Canada across Lake Erie, but you know it's there. It's the same with spring. You have to have faith, especially in Cleveland. Snow in April always breaks your heart. I think we had 2 April snows that year. Waiting for the snow to melt was like waiting for a glacier to move. Finally, it was gone for good. The ground was back, and last year's leave like a bookmark showing where you'd left off. It was a joy to get out again. Just to walk without wearing a heavy coat and boots felt like flying. But the garden was still empty. It was still too early to plant. I began to wonder if anyone would come. Maybe no one was interested, or maybe the city had shut down or sold the lot. I was worried. Then one day I passed it and someone was digging. It was a little Asian girl with a trowel and a plastic bag of lima beans. I didn't recognize her. It didn't matter. I felt as happy inside as if I'd just seen the first bird of spring. Then I looked up. There was a man in the rocker. We waved to each other. We waved and waved to each other.